This is the Deseret News National Edition, when your family needs to know more.
Hello. There is no such thing as an average American family in 2014, at least in the details of family structure. Nor does a typical mom exist, according to new research. Joining me right now to discuss this is Deseret News reporter Lois Collins. Lois, I want to start right with the research because there are some fascinating differences in family structure from 2012 to 1960. And we've got the graphic that we'll show. And the biggest change, it appears to be there in the blue, which is working moms.
Working moms, back in 1950, there were very few working moms, and now the majority of women work.
Now the green is parents, where parents are, where there's one parent working and the mom stays at home.
Which is what was very, very common. It used to be in 1960s, 1965, 50 even, that you had dads working, moms at home with the kids. By far, most families were married, and that's no longer the case. Kids still are growing up in homes where their parents are married, but moms left the home and gone to the workforce.
I noted also that there's a big change in kids living with grandparents in these statistics.
Yeah, that was almost non-existent. I mean, really, back in the 1950s and 60s when they looked at this, there was one basic family structure and everybody else was an outlier. And now there are 11 different common family structures. And so when teachers, policymakers, et cetera, talk about the typical American family, you have to stop and say, wait a minute, what's typical?
So that begs the question, if there's no typical family, have the policies kept up? Should they revamp policies to address and to meet the needs of these changing families?
There are two very distinctive thoughts on that. The first one is that we know that kids do best in families where they live with both of their parents. And so it's important to try to encourage the things that we know that kids do best with. The other thought is this family is a dodo bird. It went away, or it's going away, so we need to adjust policy to meet the new needs. And I think most policymakers are sort of somewhere in the middle between those two very different thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And you've noted that the younger generation's already gotten used to this notion of a non-stereotypical
kids.
family.
I have teenage daughters. They don't think about, well, my parents are married, your parents are divorced. They know all of their friends have such totally different situations. They don't even think in those terms anymore, I don't think.
What was the most surprising finding that you came up with in your research?
When I was looking at the research, the thing that really surprised me is that there is so much diversity that the teachers have to get their brains around in like school settings, and there's so much, all of this impacts kids. So you have to figure out how to reach kids who have all sorts of different challenges or different strengths in the same classroom, and I think that's got to be tricky.
All right, Lois, we appreciate the details on this. It's eye-opening when you look at the numbers like that side by side. And you can read more about this research online at national.deseretnews.com. Thanks, Lois. Financial stability is, of course, important to all families, but so is employer support and flexibility. Turns out those things keep employees and their families happy, and it also reduces turnover. That's according to a study from Utah State University researcher Meredith Ferguson. She joins us now via Skype. Meredith, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You know, a lot of companies tout flexible work environment and that they are pro-family, but in reality, is that what happens on the job?
That is not always the reality. Unfortunately, there are a lot of times a situation where an organization touts flexibility and flexible work arrangements and things like that, and they have policies to go along with them, but very often there tends to be a mismatch between what the policy is and what actual supervisors or managers will allow or at least support. A lot of employees may feel punished for actually using those policies and enacting them and then choose not to later, either because of their own experience or the experience of a coworker.
So if you look at job flexibility, for example, based on the numbers that Lois was showing us earlier on the definition of family, the numbers of moms working, job flexibility has got to be more important than ever to families.
It is, especially because Americans are working so many more hours per week than they were a few decades ago or even 10 or 15 years ago. That makes the flexibility even more important because they're spending more time at work, so less time on non-work activities, maybe with a family or with parents or things like that. And so that makes that flexibility an even more important resource.
Along those same lines, sort of, you found that support at work actually leads to happier marriages. Why is that?
We did. Part of it is because when people have the flexibility, and the specific flexibility we looked at was the flexibility of an employee to leave the workplace to attend to a family issue. So if a sick child needs to be picked up from school or taken to the doctor, or a parent needs to leave work early to attend a child's piano recital or a baseball game or something like that, or to take care of an aging parent, that leads to better family functioning. The family works together better. They confide in each other more. It's just a healthier family environment. And when people are in healthier families, marital satisfaction goes up. There's less likelihood of divorce and things like that. So what's good for the family is good for the marriage, and vice versa.
And does that go reverse? What's good for the family is good for the organization?
Absolutely. That to me, I think, is what we want to underline in our research. If a family is functioning better and people are are happier in their marriage, one thing we know is that translates into higher productivity at work. And specifically with our study, we found that if the spouse is happier in their marriage, happier with the organization, they are much more likely to support their spouse staying with that organization. They have that flexibility. It's good for the family. They see it as a resource. And the spouse says, stay with that organization. I realize maybe you had a bad day at work today, but on the whole, it's good, and it's good for our family. And so that support from the spouse to remain is huge.
It sounds very reciprocal then all the way around.
Absolutely.
So what's the takeaway, both for people and for managers or organizations, that you hope they come away with on your research?
I think that what organizations do that supports families and supports their employee, and really treating their employees as a whole person, not just as an employee, but recognizing they have different roles that they engage, whether that's as a parent or a spouse, or again, an employee who is a person outside the workplace taking care of an aging parent. More and more that that population is growing, and that's going to become a growing issue. That's not just good for those families and that's good for that employee, but it does come all the way back around to the organization. Too often, especially organizations, and I would say some bosses, see flexibility as a loss to the organization. This is a loss to my work group. This is a loss to my organization. And really, it's not. They need to think about that as something that pays itself back. It's not a loss. They're investing resources in a meaningful way.
Thank you. We appreciate the insights. Meredith Ferguson from Utah State University.
Thank you.
The Robertson clan is used to ruffling feathers. You know that. Straight ahead, find out why two of the stars of Duck Dynasty were especially proud to appear in the movie God's Not Dead.